When my son died, his widow didn't even wait for the funeral to talk about assets. She thinks she inherited everything, including the house I live in. She's already scheduling viewings with developers, planning to ship me to a home. She calls me the tenant. What she doesn't know is that the deed, it's been in my name for 8 years. My name is Margaret Holloway. Though everyone who loved me ever called me Maggie, I am 62 years old, a widow. And I was sitting in the quiet of my 2-story house in the Phoenix suburbs when the phone rang. It was Olivia, my daughter-in-law. Her voice was dry, scraped clean of all emotion. Maggie, Ethan is gone. My son. My only son. The words didn't compute. I gripped the receiver, my knuckles white. What are you talking about? Olivia. A heart attack, she said, her tone as flat as an invoice. It was sudden. A cold, hollow space opened up in my chest. But before I could even process the grief, her voice hardened. The construction company, his company, it all comes to me now, of course. And Maggie. She paused. You should probably start making arrangements, looking into a home. There will be a lot of assets to manage. I was paralyzed. My son had been dead for maybe an hour, and she was talking about assets, about putting me in a home. Something was jagged and wrong. I hung up and drove. I don't remember the drive. I went to the hospital first, but they said he'd never been brought in. I sped to their house, the big modern one Ethan had been so proud of. The driveway gate was closed. Olivia came out onto the porch, pulling a silk robe tight. She wouldn't buzz me in. It's all being handled. Maggie. It was messy. I need to see him, I begged, my voice breaking. Please, Olivia, just let me see my boy. No, that's not possible. The coroner's people. It's better this way. She blocked the path. A gatekeeper to my own son's death. She wouldn't let me into his room. She wouldn't let me see his body. I stood there, helpless, on the curb, when a black SUV pulled out of their driveway. It had a logo on the side, Urban Nest Developments. A man in a sharp suit I didn't recognize stepped out of the house, paused on the porch, and shook Olivia's hand. It wasn't a handshake of condolence. It was firm, quick, business. Olivia saw me watching. She turned back, her face twisting into something ugly. He was a broken cash machine. Maggie! She spat out, the words hitting me harder than a slap. He's been broken for a while. She glanced down the street, in the direction of my neighborhood. And that house you're rattling around in, it's going to need someone who actually knows how to manage property soon. The threat was unmistakable. Even then, shattered as I was. I tried. I moved toward the gate, my arms outstretched. Olivia? He's gone. We have to. She physically recoiled from my attempt at an embrace. I have calls to make, she said, her voice dropping to a cold, formal whisper. She turned around, walked inside, and shut the heavy front door. The click of the deadbolt echoed across the manicured lawn. It was the sound of a vault closing, sealing Ethan away from me forever. The drive home was a blur of tears and sickening realization. I spent 30 years as a high school principal. I've dealt with budgets, legal contracts, and behavioral problems. I know procedure. I know what grief looks like. This wasn't it. The speed of her calculations, the talk of assets, the immediate arrival of a developer, it was too fast, too cold, too organized. I walked back into my own house, the house where Ethan took his first steps. His graduation photo smiled at me from the mantel. I sank into my armchair, remembering our last conversation, just 4 days ago. He'd sounded stressed, unlike himself. "It's just some money stuff, Mom," he'd said, trying to brush it off. "Olivia, there are just some things that aren't lining up. Don't worry, I'll handle it." I looked at his picture. "Oh, Ethan," I whispered. I decided then. She would not call my son a broken machine. She would not talk about managing my house. I would not be pushed aside like a piece of old furniture. That night, sleep was impossible. The grief was a physical weight, but the anger was a burning coal beneath it. At 2 a.m, I went down to the basement, to the old fireproof safe that held our most important documents. I worked the combination, my fingers stiff. I pulled out the files related to the house, the stacks of real estate papers from over the years. My hands were shaking, partly from shock, partly from age. They brushed across a thick, legal-sized folder, bound in blue cardstock. My name, Margaret Ann Holloway, was typed clearly on the tab. I pulled it out, the weight of it suddenly heavy, the secret inside pulsing like a second heart. I arrived at the funeral home an hour early, driven by a desperate, hollow need to see Ethan's face one last time. A funeral director in a dark suit, his face a mask of professional sympathy, intercepted me before I reached the chapel. "Mrs. Holloway," he murmured. "I'm terribly sorry. Mrs. Ethan Holloway, that is." She requested a closed casket, for aesthetic reasons. Aesthetic reasons? The words were sterile, cold. She had barred me from his house, and now she had locked the lid on my son. She was denying me even the sight of his peaceful face. My final goodbye. The chapel filled. But it was not our crowd. It was hers. Sleek. Young professionals I didn't recognize. Friends of hers from the city. Colleagues from her brief, high-paying marketing job. I watched Olivia. She was a perfect performance of calculated sorrow. Her black dress was couture. Her makeup artfully smudged. Her hand trembling just enough as she accepted condolences. I moved to the front row, to the seat that belonged to his mother. It was occupied. Olivia had placed her own mother, her sister, and 2 of her girlfriends there. An usher, looking embarrassed, touched my elbow. "Mrs. Holloway, your seat is just here," he whispered, guiding me to the second row. It was a deliberate, public slight, a demotion. I was no longer family. I was an audience member. When Olivia took the podium, a hush fell. She began by painting Ethan not as the warm, complicated man I had raised, but as a business visionary. Her voice, thick and practiced, broke as she told the room how Ethan had always promised to leave everything in her capable hands. She dabbed an eye. "He trusted me," she declared, "to manage his entire legacy, to protect what he built." She wasn't just eulogizing him. She was staking her claim in front of witnesses. I felt the glances. I heard the whispers ripple behind me. Poor woman. She'll have to move out now. It's Olivia's house, you know. The old mother was just staying. The humiliation was a hot, acidic burn beneath the crushing weight of grief. After the service, as we stood in the reception area, a hand gripped my arm. It was Ruth Kaplan, our neighbor for 30 years, the one who watched Ethan grow up. She pulled me aside, her eyes sharp and angry. "Maggie, I have to tell you," she whispered, her voice urgent. "I heard them. About 3 weeks ago. shouting like I've never heard. Ethan was furious. He yelled something about a secret loan and urban nest. And then, clear as day, I heard him shout, "You will not touch my mother's house." Olivia? My mother's house. He knew. Before I could respond, I saw Olivia across the room. The grief mask was gone. She was in a tight huddle with the same man I'd seen at her house, the one in the expensive suit. Today, it was blue. He looked impatient. I moved closer, pretending to examine the guest book. The neighborhood redevelopment is on a tight schedule. Olivia, the man said, his voice low. I now knew this was Victor Slate. We need that final piece. Don't worry, Victor, Olivia replied, her voice cold steel. That old house is the last obstacle. I am handling it. She turned then, and she saw me watching. The mask of the grieving widow snapped back into place. She picked up a cup of coffee from the table and walked toward me, her smile dripping with false concern. She held the coffee out, not as an equal, but as a benefactor bestowing charity. She raised her voice just enough for the surrounding cluster of mourners to hear. "Oh, Maggie. There you are," she cooed. "I'm so glad we have this moment. I just want you to know, you don't need to worry your head about a thing. In a few weeks, just as soon as the paperwork is transferred, I'll be arranging a much more suitable place for you to live." It was a public execution, a suitable place. The nursing home. She was throwing me out, right here, over my son's casket. The urge to scream was deafening. I wanted to shout that I knew what she was. I wanted to tell her. That old house is mine. The deed is in my name. But my training as a principal, the instinct to handle a crisis, took over. If I showed her my weapon now, she would counter before I could fire. I would lose the one advantage I had. I took the coffee. My hand did not shake. I looked her directly in the eyes, letting my gaze hold hers. "That's very efficient of you, Olivia," I said, my voice quiet, devoid of the emotion she expected. "But I wouldn't start packing my things just yet." I turned away from her, her mask of sorrow now frozen in a look of momentary confusion. I allowed myself a small smile, thin and sharp as a filed blade. She had no idea who she was dealing with. Back in the quiet of my house, the silence amplifying the tremor in my hands. I returned to the blue folder I had pulled from the basement safe. I opened it on the dining room table. There it was, crisp and official on heavy cardstock, the grant deed, filed and recorded with Maricopa County 8 years ago. I ran my thumb over the definitive typed line, "Vests in Margaret Ann Holloway, a widow, as her sole and separate property." The memory of that day returned, pushing through the fog of grief. My husband, Robert, had been alive then, his hand warm and solid on my back. Ethan's business was just starting to take off, just beginning to sign contracts for more than just kitchen remodels. We were refinancing the house to pull out a little cash for some repairs. Our lawyer, a cautious man, had advised us. "Robert, Maggie," he'd said, "Ethan is in the most litigious business in America. One bad subcontractor, one accident on a job site, and they can sue him for everything he has. You do not want this house, your primary asset, tied to the liability of his new LLC. So, we changed the title. It was a simple protection, removing Robert's name upon his passing and ensuring the deed was solely, cleanly in mine, completely insulated from Ethan's business risks. Ethan had been there, signing the appendixes. He'd fully agreed. "It's Mom's fortress," he'd joked, kissing my cheek. "We're just lucky she lets us live in it." Olivia had married him 3 years after that. She had never been part of our financial history. She had just walked in, seen the nice house, and assumed it was all part of her new husband's portfolio. She must have believed, or perhaps just chosen to believe, that the house was Ethan's to inherit, and therefore hers to liquidate. I closed the folder. This document was the only thing standing between me and the suitable place she had picked out for me. It was my one, singular advantage. In a life that had been stripped bare in the last 48 hours. It was the only secret I had left. I would not be using it. Not yet. I needed counsel. Not just a lawyer, but someone who knew me. I called Harris Cole. Harris had been the chief legal counsel for the school district for 20 years, as a principal. I had been in countless closed-door meetings with him, navigating everything from union disputes to tricky student expulsions. He was meticulous, sharp, and had zero patience for theatrics. We met at a coffee shop downtown, far from my neighborhood. He looked older, grayer, but his eyes were the same. They didn't miss a thing. "Maggie," he said, taking a sip of his black coffee. "It's been too long. I was so terribly sorry to hear about Ethan." I gave him the short version, the suddenness of the death, the chillingly composed phone call from Olivia, the locked gate, the closed casket. And then I told him about the man at her house, the handshake, and the logo on the black SUV Urban Nest Developments. Harris's posture changed. He put his cup down. "Urban Nest," he said, the name tasting bad. "I know them. They aren't just developers, Maggie. They're predators. They specialize in neighborhood revitalization. They buy up properties, target elderly homeowners, push them into quick sales or assisted living, and then tear everything down to build luxury condos." I slid a photocopy of the deed across the table. I didn't tell him Olivia didn't know about it. I just said, "This is the current title. She seems to believe she can have me removed." Harris studied the paper for a long moment, then looked up at me. "Legally, Maggie, this is ironclad. This is your home. She has no claim. She cannot evict you. She cannot move you. She cannot force a sale. She is a non-entity regarding this property." A wave of relief, so profound it almost made me dizzy, washed over me. But Harris held up a hand. "That's the legal answer," he said, his voice hardening. "But people like this, the ones who partner with Urban Nest, they don't play fair. They won't let a piece of paper stop them. They will try to get around it. They'll forge documents, or they'll claim you made a verbal agreement." He leaned in, his voice dropping. "Or they will attack your competency. They will try to paint you as a confused, senile old woman who can't be trusted with her own property. They will try to get guardianship." "What do I do?" "You document everything," he said, the old district lawyer snapping into focus. "Every phone call, every text, every unannounced visit. Get a new notebook. Write down every threat, every sly comment Olivia has made. Log the time, the date, and the exact words used. If they're going to build a case against you, we're going to build a better one." I left that coffee shop feeling less like a victim and more like the principal of North High again. I was no longer just a grieving mother. I was a woman preparing for a fight. I went straight to the store and bought a black and white composition notebook. When I got home, I sat at my kitchen table and opened it. I wrote the date, Item 1, Call from Olivia. Declared Ethan dead. Stated his company and assets, including this house, now belonged to her. Stated I should start looking into a home. It was a Tuesday, exactly 1 week after I buried my son, when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Olivia on my doorstep, flanked by Victor Slate and a young woman in a sharp blazer, clutching an iPad. Before I could speak, Olivia brushed past me into the foyer, her heels clicking on the hardwood I'd refinished myself. "As you can see," Olivia said to the young woman, ignoring me completely. "The bones are good, but it's terribly dated. We'll open this wall up, create a clear sightline to the back, a modern concept." She was talking about my home, my living room. "Olivia, what is this?" I demanded, my voice shaking with a mixture of rage and shock. Olivia finally turned to me, her smile thin and dismissive. She gestured to the young realtor. "Maggie, this is... well, it doesn't matter. She's just here to assess." She then looked at the realtor and said, with a light, patronizing laugh, "This is Maggie, Ethan's mother. She's been staying here temporarily, just until we get things rearranged." Staying here, temporarily. Like I was a guest who had overstayed her welcome, not the woman who had paid the mortgage on this house for 35 years. Victor Slate stepped forward, all polished charm. "Mrs. Holloway," he said, "we understand change is difficult, especially at this time. That's why Urban Nest is prepared to offer you a generous elder care relocation package." He slid a thick sheaf of documents from his briefcase and placed them on my entry table. "This just outlines the support. A one-time payment, a very nice one, to help you transition. All we require is that you sign the voluntary vacation agreement. You'd need to be out within, say, 30 days. And of course, sign a waiver agreeing not to make any further claims on the estate." I looked at the cover sheet. They were offering me a pittance, less than the value of my car, to surrender my life. "I am not signing anything," I said, my voice low and steady. "And I am not going anywhere. This is my home." Olivia's veneer of civility cracked instantly. The grieving widow vanished. "Don't be difficult. Maggie," she snapped. "This house is part of Ethan's estate. My estate. I have debts to pay. I am trying to be nice about this, but I will do this the legal way if I have to. You are just a resident here. You are not the owner." "Get out," I said, pointing to the door. "All of you." Victor merely raised an eyebrow, collected his papers, and followed Olivia out. She was the last to leave, pausing on the porch. "You're making a mistake, old woman. You can't win this." 3 days later, I learned what she meant by the legal way. A uniformed man, a process server, knocked on my door. He handed me a folded set of papers. "You've been served, ma'am." It was a summons, an official complaint for eviction, filed in the Maricopa County Housing Court. Plaintiff Olivia Holloway, executor of the estate of Ethan Holloway. Defendant Margaret Holloway. My hands trembled as I read the allegations. Termination of tenancy at will. Refusal to vacate to allow for the sale of an estate asset. Asset required to satisfy outstanding debts of the deceased. The gossip started that same afternoon. I saw Mrs. Kaplan, my neighbor, glance at me through her blinds and then quickly look away. Olivia had already poisoned the well, painting me as a greedy, senile mother-in-law trying to steal from her grieving son's widow. But the real terror set in when I got to exhibit a proof of ownership. It was a copy of a deed. But it wasn't my deed. It was a quitclaim deed, purportedly signed by Ethan Holloway, granting the property solely to himself. My name was nowhere on it. My stomach turned to ice. The signature looked like Ethan's. It was dated 6 weeks ago. This was forgery. This was a lie, manufactured and filed, designed to erase me. I immediately scanned the documents and emailed them to Harris. He called me back within 10 minutes, his voice stripped of all pleasantries. "It's a quitclaim deed. Maggie," he said, his voice tight. Sloppy, but dangerous. "The notary stamp is clear. I've looked him up. He's a mobile notary with a P.O. box. But the date? You said Ethan was sick." "He was in the hospital that whole week," I whispered, the room spinning. "With that infection." "That's our angle. But Maggie, listen to me very carefully," Harris said, his voice sharp, pulling me back. "Do not go to the courthouse. Do not call Olivia. And do not, under any circumstances, show her your deed." "But it's a fake," I insisted. "Mine is real. I know. And she doesn't. Right now. She thinks you're just a tenant. She's filed an eviction based on a fraudulent document. This is her entire case. If you show her your deed now, she will pivot. She will claim your deed is the fake one, or she'll find another way to attack. No. We let her build her entire church on this quicksand. We're not just going to defend. We are going to countersue. I'm filing our response, and I am petitioning the county recorder for a full, certified chain of title. And while we wait for the court date, you and I are going to find out everything there is to know about Ethan's finances, his death, and Olivia's relationship with Urban Nest. Harris Cole was no longer just an old acquaintance. He was my attorney. He filed the official response to the eviction summons, a document cold and sharp as glass. It denied every single one of Olivia's claims, stated I was the sole legal owner, and formally requested the judge to postpone any hearing to allow for discovery time to gather evidence of what we both knew was true. He didn't want to wait. "We're going to the county," he said. The next morning, the Maricopa County Recorder's Office was a sterile, bureaucratic place. Harris, however, navigated it like a school hallway he had walked for 30 years. He led me to a counter where a clerk, after we'd filled out the forms, pulled the complete recorded history of my property. We sat at a side table, the thick stack of documents between us. Harris laid them out in chronological order, and there, at the end of the legitimate chain, was the deed from 8 years ago, clear as day, Margaret Ann Holloway. "And here," Harris said, tapping a flimsy sheet at the very back of the file, "is hers." It was the quitclaim deed. The clerk, a helpful woman with sharp eyes, came over. "Oh, that one," she said, looking at it. "That one's not fully processed." "What do you mean?" I asked. "It came in through the e-file system," she explained, pointing. "See, it was filed after the date of death listed. It's just a digital submission, not yet verified. The notary is just a digital signature. We've been having trouble with those. Looks suspicious to me." Harris looked at me. Olivia had been so brazen, so sure of herself, that she had filed a fraudulent document into a public system, likely hoping no one would look closely enough until I was already on the street. "We have our first concrete piece of fraud," Harris said quietly as we walked out into the Arizona sun. "But it's not enough. She'll say Ethan filed it before he died, and it was just delayed. We need more. I'm bringing someone in. He introduced me to Naomi Price. She was a private investigator, perhaps in her early 40s, with a no-nonsense haircut and an air of complete, unnerving competence. She'd spent 15 years as a fraud investigator for a major insurance carrier. Real estate deed fraud, especially targeting seniors, Naomi said, sipping black coffee in Harris's office. It's the bread and butter of bottom-feeder developers like Urban Nest. It's appallingly common. She turned to me, her gaze softening just slightly. Mrs. Holloway, I'm sorry for your loss. But to beat her, we have to understand her motive. And it's always money. Naomi started where Olivia lived her social media. It was public. While I was drowning in grief, Naomi was scrolling through years of Olivia's life, cataloguing. Here, she said, turning a laptop toward us. She's at a spa in Scottsdale, posted 4 days after the funeral. Here she is with a new designer handbag, $3,000, at least. And this one, a champagne toast, posted just 2 months ago. The caption says, "Big things coming." Her lifestyle far outstripped the income of a young construction company. While Naomi tracked the money, Harris, with my signature as next of kin, subpoenaed Ethan's medical records. Grief was a constant fog. But this was a task. This was work. As a principal, I knew how to investigate. I went back to Ethan's neighborhood. I talked to the neighbors, the ones who had seen me bring Ethan home from the hospital as a baby. They talked. Oh, how they talked. They told me about the fights, the late-night screaming matches. One neighbor, Mrs. Sanchez, told me she heard terrible banging one night, and Olivia screaming, "You're ruining us with these damn debts." I gave all of it to Harris and Naomi. I wrote down the names of Ethan's doctors, the nurses on his floor, the pharmacy that delivered his medication. A week later, Harris called me back to his office. He had the medical files. He'd found a note from Ethan's primary care physician, dated just 2 weeks before his death. Ethan was lucid, alert. The doctor had written, "Patient is suffering from high anxiety, expressed concern over severe financial stress at home, stated he needed to talk to his lawyer about his wife's spending." It was exactly what he had tried to tell me. We were all there, in Harris's office, the weight of the evidence settling around us. When Naomi's cell phone rang, she put it on speaker. It was one of her contacts in the insurance world. "You were right to have me run that. Naomi," the voice said, sounding tinny and grim. "I found it. A life insurance policy. Taken out 11 months ago. Big one." "How big?" Harris asked. $1.5 million, the voice said. "The sole beneficiary is the wife, Olivia Holloway. The death certificate just cleared. The company is processing the payout right now." Naomi met us back in Harris's office, laying out the insurance documents. "It's $1.5 million, she said. Her voice clipped. "The policy was activated 11 months ago. The premiums were paid directly, every month, from the Holloway Renovations LLC business account." She slid a copy of the application across the desk. "And this is the key. Ethan's signature is on it, but all the correspondence, the setup, the medical questionnaire follow-ups, it was all handled by Olivia." The air in the room grew cold. It was one thing to be greedy. It was another to place a cash value on your husband's life. Naomi's next move was to get the bank statements for Ethan's company, which Harris was able to petition for as part of the estate discovery. She spread them across the conference table, page after page, highlighted in yellow. Here, and here, and here, she said, tapping the entries. Large sums, tens of thousands of dollars, moved from the business account to Olivia's personal account over the last 6 months. The memo lines were laughably vague. Consulting fee, management advance, project reimbursement. Harris brought in a specialist, a forensic accountant named Leonard Briggs. He was a quiet man who looked more like a librarian than a bloodhound. He spent an afternoon with the statements and delivered his preliminary conclusion. "It's a slow-motion bleed," Leonard said, adjusting his glasses. "She was siphoning money, systematically. The company was being drained, which explains the cash flow problems your son mentioned. He wasn't just stressed, he was being hollowed out." The memory of my neighbor Ruth Kaplan's words came back to me. I told Naomi. She went back to see Ruth the same day. Ruth, now a firm ally, was more specific. "It was maybe 2 weeks before he passed," Ruth told Naomi. "He was on his porch, well after midnight, smoking a cigarette. I heard him plain. He was on the phone, and he said, 'If you pull $1 more from the company account, I swear, I'll freeze everything. Olivia, I am done.'" The darkness was deepening, the edges of my grief now sharpened by a chilling, terrifying clarity. Naomi pulled the medical report again. "He died at home," she said softly. "On a Wednesday morning." Olivia's statement to the 911 operator said she overslept and found him in the den. Naomi pointed to a line in the EMT's report. "He had a home heart monitor, prescribed after his hospital stay. According to the device's log, it was unplugged from the wall outlet at 3:15 a.m., several hours before she found him." Naomi drew a red circle around the time. It wasn't proof of murder, but it was a cold, hard, deliberate act in a house where a sick man was sleeping. While I processed this, Naomi had also been mapping Victor Slate's activities. "Urban Nest isn't just interested in your house, Maggie," she said, showing me a map of my neighborhood. The houses marked in red, 7 of them, all on my street or the next one over, had all been purchased by Urban Nest in the last 2 years. "Every sale was below market value," Naomi said. "And in 5 of those cases, the owner was elderly, over 70, and was moved into an assisted living facility within a month of the sale. Victor wasn't just a developer, he was a specialist. The last piece fell into place from one of Ethan's former employees, a young carpenter named Kyle. Naomi found him, and he was eager to talk. "Ethan was a good boss," Kyle said. "But that wife of his, she was always around the office, messing with the books." He told Naomi about a night Ethan had called him, frantic, about a massive invoice for materials he'd never ordered. "He showed me the signature on the purchase order," Kyle said. "It was his name, but it just looked a little off. Too neat. Kinda not Ethan's quick scrawl. Just like the signature on the quitclaim deed." Harris finally sat back, clasping his hands on his desk. He looked at me, his eyes full of a grim resolve. "Now we see the whole board," he said. "Olivia was bleeding Ethan dry. He found out and threatened to cut her off. She needed a final play. She had the insurance policy, but that only pays after he's gone. She was in debt. Urban Nest was her answer. She fakes the quitclaim deed, believing you're just an old woman she can scare off. Then Ethan dies. She gets the insurance, and she gets to sell your house to Victor to clear her debts and walk away rich. We have to stop her, I whispered. We will, Harris said. But not by shouting. We're not going to the police today. They'll call it a civil dispute. No. We are going to build an iron box. We will quietly forward the evidence of the deed forgery, the financial fraud, and the insurance timeline to a contact I have in the district attorney's office. We let them open the criminal file. And in the meantime, we prepare for that eviction hearing. We let her walk right into that courtroom, swell with confidence, and commit perjury on the stand. We let her testify that that fake deed is real. We prepare the stage, Maggie, and when the time is right, we flip the lights on. Olivia's realization that I would not be easily broken must have come quickly. The eviction notice hadn't sent me packing. The insulting relocation package had been refused. When her legal threats failed to move me, she escalated, shifting her attack from my tenancy to my sanity. It was exactly what Harris had warned me she would do. The knock came on a Thursday morning. Not a process server, but a woman in a county polo shirt, holding a clipboard. Her smile was professional, but her eyes were assessing. Mrs. Margaret Holloway. She asked. I'm Maggie, yes. My name is Ms. Diaz. I'm with Adult Protective Services. We received an anonymous call expressing concern for your welfare. May I come in? My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my face calm. I was a principal. I knew this game. It was an inspection. Of course, I said, stepping back. I was alone. Harris had warned me this might happen. I had to be perfect. She sat on the edge of my sofa, her gaze sweeping the living room, looking for the hoarding I was sure had been mentioned. So, Mrs. Holloway, she began. The report we received alleges you might be experiencing some confusion, paranoia, that you are perhaps unable to care for yourself adequately. It also mentioned a tendency to accumulate things. I sat opposite her. I can assure you, I am not confused. Ms. Diaz, I am grieving. She ticked a box on her form. Do you manage your own finances? Are you able to pay your bills? Yes. I balance my checkbook every Friday. And your medications, are you able to keep track of them? Yes. I use a weekly organizer. How about cooking? Do you feel safe in the kitchen? Any incidents? Forgetting the stove is on. I was about to answer when the front door flew open, hitting the wall. Olivia rushed in, her face a mask of frantic, practiced concern. Her mother, Eleanor, trailed behind her, looking grim. Oh, thank God you're here. Olivia breathed, rushing to the social worker and ignoring me. I'm Olivia, her daughter-in-law. We had to make the call. We just couldn't live with ourselves. She was claiming the anonymous call, a strategic, cruel move. We are so worried, Olivia continued, her voice breaking. She's not herself. She's been forgetting the stove is on. We've smelled it. And the screaming at night. She wakes up convinced people are in the house. She's terrified and paranoid. We just want her to be safe. Eleanor nodded. And the hoarding, dear. It's a fire hazard. We're afraid she'll be trapped. I had spent 30 years watching teenagers lie to my face. This was amateur hour, but it was dangerous. I stood up. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the room. Ms. Diaz. The social worker turned, her head tilted, caught between the two performances. I am a 62-year-old woman, and I am not senile, I said. You asked about my cooking. I walked to the kitchen. She followed, as did Olivia and her mother. I opened the refrigerator, revealing neatly labeled containers of soup and a full crisper. I am cooking. I am eating. I walked to the counter and pointed to my pill organizer. My medication, organized for the week. I then went to the small desk in the corner and picked up my checkbook. My finances, balanced this morning. My bills, paid. I turned to Olivia. You are concerned about hoarding. The basement contains my late husband's tools and 30 years of Christmas decorations. It is not a fire hazard. It is a life. I looked back at Ms. Diaz. My daughter-in-law is trying to evict me from my own home. When I refused to leave, she filed this report. That is the paranoia in this house, Ms. Diaz. Hers. The social worker's face was unreadable, but she closed her notebook. She looked from my organized kitchen to Olivia's flushed, furious face. The act had collapsed. Mrs. Holloway, Ms. Diaz said to me, your home seems immaculate, and you are clearly very organized. I see no grounds for an emergency intervention. She gave Olivia a pointed look. We will, of course. Keep the file open for review. She left. Olivia's mask of concern was gone, replaced by a cold fury. She had failed to have me legally declared incompetent. So she turned to a public execution. The next day, her social media exploded. She wrote a long, weeping post about her unimaginable grief and the unfortunate situation with her elderly mother-in-law, who seems to believe the house belongs to her. She painted me as greedy, cruel, and, worst of all, trying to steal the inheritance from Ethan's future children. Ethan and Olivia had no children. They had never even, to my knowledge, tried. The comments were a torrent of poison, calling me a monster. I called Harris, my voice shaking with rage and humiliation. Good, he said, and I could hear the grim satisfaction in his voice. Don't you dare respond, Maggie. You print every comment, every post. She is handing us a signed confession of her motive to defame and harass you. A day later, the next coordinated attack arrived by registered mail. It was a letter from Victor Slate on Urban Nest letterhead. It was a formal, insulting offer to buy my home for less than 20% of its market value. The final sentence was a threat veiled in politeness. We believe this is a more than fair offer to avoid the significant time, expense, and public stress of a protracted legal battle over the title. That night, I sat in the dark in my living room. The silence was heavy. I listened to the recordings I had started making of every phone call, just in case. Beside me, on the end table, my husband's old Bible sat next to the blue folder. I ran my hand over the cover, over the deed with my name on it. The hearing was in 3 weeks. Harris wanted to wait, to spring the trap. But sitting there, feeling the weight of the lies, the public shame, and Victor's threats, I wondered if I could last that long. I wondered if I had the strength to keep this one, powerful secret, or if I would snap and use my weapon long before the battle had even begun. The official notice arrived at Harris's office. The eviction hearing was set. We had 3 weeks. 3 weeks until Olivia and her high-priced lawyers from Foster and Keene would stand up in housing court and present their righteous case for throwing a grieving mother out of her home to stabilize the estate. This is their stage, Maggie, Harris told me, his face grim. They're going to paint you as confused and greedy. Our job is to let them build the entire set before we burn it down. The pace, which had been a slow, agonizing investigation suddenly accelerated into a sprint. While Harris's legal team prepared for the civil hearing, Naomi focused on the criminal track. "The DA's office has our packet," she reported, joining us in Harris's office. "They've opened a preliminary file. They smell the smoke, the insurance, the deed, the urban nest connection. But right now, it's just a stack of paper. They need a public fire. A moment where Olivia and Victor are forced to commit to their lies on the record. They need a push." Naomi, it turned out, was an expert at pushing. She had been working on Victor Slate's assistant, a young woman named Jenna. Jenna? Naomi explained, was one of those rare people who still had a conscience. She'd been hired thinking she was in real estate, not in the business of preying on the elderly. "She's sick of it," Naomi said, a rare hint of triumph in her voice. She saw what they did to an 80-year-old man on the next block. She's in. 2 days later, Jenna walked out of her office with a flash drive. She met Naomi in a coffee shop far from downtown. On that drive was every email between Victor and Olivia, and something better, a digital audio file. We listened to it in Harris's office, the three of us. It was a meeting, recorded on Jenna's phone. Victor's voice was smooth and impatient. "The investors are antsy. Olivia, this needs to be done. We break ground in 60 days. Then, Olivia's voice, sharp and dismissive. "She's just an old woman. The eviction court will handle her. But if she won't go, the competency hearing is my backup. Don't worry. Victor, I will drag that old bitch out of there before your deadline. I promise you that." Harris just nodded, his face like stone, and clicked, save. While Naomi built the criminal case, Harris and Leonard Briggs finalized the financial one. Leonard produced a report on Ethan's company that was devastatingly simple, designed not for an accountant, but for a tired housing court judge. It was a timeline. Here was the company's health. Here were Olivia's withdrawals, labeled consulting, and here was the company's nosedive into debt. It was a clear, undeniable motive. My role was to become a witness. Harris prepped me relentlessly. "They will try to make you angry," he coached me. "They will call you confused. They will twist your grief. You will not give them that. You will look at the judge. You will be calm. Your answers will be short. Yes. No. I don't recall." He made me practice my most important line over and over, until the emotion was gone and only the steel remained. "I never signed any document transferring this house to my son or to Olivia. I never signed any document transferring this house. This house has been in my name, and my name only, for 8 years. The most critical decision was made: we would not file my deed with the court beforehand. This is our trump card. Maggie," Harris insisted. "If we show it to them now, they have 3 weeks to invent a new lie, a new, more convincing forgery. No. We let Olivia and her lawyer stand up in that court, hold up that fake quitclaim deed, and swear to God that it is true. We let them commit perjury. Then we show them the truth." Naomi made the final move. She coordinated with her contact at the district attorney's office. An investigator from their white-collar crime division, a plainclothes detective, would be sitting in the public gallery during our hearing, just observing, ready to act. The nights were the hardest. The strategy was sound, but my mind was a traitor. I lay awake, the image of Ethan's smile haunting me. A terrible, creeping guilt wormed its way in. If I had been more open about the deed, if I had told Ethan years ago, Don't worry. She can never touch the house. It's mine. Would he have had the strength to stand up to her? Would he still be alive? I confessed this to Harris, my voice small. He stopped me. Maggie, no. That is a path with no end. The fault lies with the person who chose to lie, who chose to steal, and who chose to betray, not with the person who was trying to protect her family. The evening before the hearing, I stood on my front porch as the sun went down, that brilliant, unforgiving Arizona sunset. I looked down the street. I could see 2 of the houses Victor had bought. They were already gone, replaced by giant, grey boxes of glass and steel that loomed over the neighborhood. I went inside and picked up the blue folder. I held the deed in my hand, the paper that proved I was real, that my life here was real. I promised Robert, and I promised Ethan this is the one they will not get. This is the fortress, and tomorrow they will meet the principal. The housing court was packed. The air was stale, smelling of old coffee and cheap cleaner. Harris and I sat at the defendant's table. I looked at the crowd. My neighbours were there, their faces a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. I saw a few local reporters, sniffing out the human interest angle, the poor, grieving widow versus the greedy old mother-in-law. I saw 2 men in dark suits from Urban Nest, and in the very back row, a small, pale woman I recognized from Naomi's file, Jenna, Victor's assistant, staring at her lap. Then Olivia made her entrance. She swept in, flanked by her lawyer, a sharp-looking man from Foster and Keene. Olivia was dressed in expensive black, her eyes artfully red-rimmed, her face a perfect mask of strained nobility. She never once looked at me. She sat at the plaintiff's table, the picture of a woman forced to do an unpleasant duty. She was the victim. Her lawyer, Mr. Keene, stood up. His voice was smooth, reasonable, and dripped with false empathy. Your Honour, this is a simple, though deeply tragic, matter of settling an estate. My client, Olivia Holloway, is the executor of her late husband's will. Among his assets is the property at 1280 Sycamore Drive. He gestured to me. His mother, Mrs. Holloway, was residing there as a guest of her son. Now, tragically, the estate is in considerable debt, and my client must liquidate assets. We have made generous offers for relocation. Mrs. Holloway has refused. He even mentioned the future children she and Ethan had planned for, a sickening, fictional flourish. We have filed, Your Honour, he continued, the controlling document, the quitclaim deed. He placed a document on the overhead projector. There it was, magnified on the wall. A deed. It looked real. Ethan's signature, a very good forgery, was at the bottom. The notary stamp looked official. The date was 6 weeks ago. The judge, a weary-looking man, nodded, taking notes. This seems straightforward. Counsel. I felt the room tilt. The whispers started behind me. She's really fighting it. How greedy can you get after he let her live there? I gripped my hands in my lap, my knuckles white. I stared straight ahead, just as Harris had told me. Olivia was called to the stand. Her performance was masterful. She cried, but not too much. Her voice, thick with sorrow, explained how Ethan always wanted me to be financially secure. And what was the arrangement with his mother? Her lawyer asked, his voice gentle. Oh, Ethan. He worried so much. Olivia wept. He said she was lonely, rattling around in that big house. He let her stay. He loved his mother. He would be devastated to know that she is fighting me on this. Keene then turned, his voice hardening slightly. And Mrs. Holloway, you were so concerned about her mental state that you felt compelled to call Adult Protective Services. Isn't that right? A small collective gasp went up. The judge looked over at me, his gaze lingering, his brow furrowing. The seed was planted. I wasn't just greedy. I was confused. I was senile. Then it was my turn. Keene's cross-examination was brutal. He was a rapid-fire attacker. Mrs. Holloway, you lived in that house rent-free, did you not? It is my home. That is not what I asked. Ma'am, did you pay your son rent, yes or no? No. So you were living there by his good graces, a guest. He hammered me on dates, on finances, trying to make me look confused. I paused, trying to be precise, as Harris had drilled me. I don't recall the exact date, I said. Keene smirked at the judge. She seems uncertain. Your Honor? Then he delivered his final, prepared blow. Your Honor, we submit Exhibit B, an email from the defendant, Mrs. Holloway, to her son, dated last year. He put it on the projector. It was short. Thank you again. It's such a relief not to worry about things. I'm so grateful you're letting me stay in the house. I stared at it. I had never written that email. The phrasing was wrong. It wasn't my voice. A clear acknowledgement of the tenancy agreement, Keene said, sitting down, triumphant. The room buzzed. The judge looked convinced. We will take a 15-minute recess, the judge said, rapping his gavel. I felt numb. Harris just placed a hand on my arm. Stay calm, Maggie. This is exactly what we wanted. I stood up to walk into the hallway. Olivia, on her way out, brushed past me. Her perfume was thick, choking. She leaned in, her voice no longer the grieving widow, but a low, vicious hiss. You should have signed. Maggie. It's over. You're old. You don't need a whole house. Why are you clinging to it? I looked into her cold, victorious eyes, and in that moment, the fear vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp resolve. She had just given me all the strength I needed. When the court resumed, Harris stood. His voice was calm, projecting across the room. Your Honor, the defense calls its first witness, and we wish to submit the full, certified chain of title for the property at 1280 Sycamore Drive. He called the clerk from the Maricopa County Recorder's office. She walked to the stand, carrying the certified file. Harris led her through a simple, devastating series of questions. Ma'am, can you please identify the last, fully executed, verified deed recorded for this property? She looked at her file. The last verified deed was a grant deed, recorded 8 years ago. It vests ownership solely in Margaret Ann Holloway. And the quitclaim deed, Harris said, gesturing to Olivia's Exhibit A. The one filed by the plaintiff. The clerk shook her head, looking at her notes. That was an e-filing, Your Honor. It was submitted after the date of death listed for Mr. Holloway. It is unverified and has been flagged by our system as irregular. It has not been processed. Harris then placed my blue folder on the projector. Your Honor, I present the defense's Exhibit 1, the certified original deed. My name, Margaret Ann Holloway, blazed onto the wall. The room was absolutely, profoundly silent. Olivia's lawyer, Keene, shot to his feet. Objection. This This is clearly a system error, a clerical mistake. Our deed is valid. Overruled, the judge snapped. It's a verified document from the county. Counsel, sit down. Harris wasn't finished. It's not an error, Your Honor. It's motive. He called Leonard Briggs. Leonard calmly presented his forensic report, the timeline of Olivia siphoning over $200,000 from Ethan's company, the fake invoices, the consulting fees. He proved, in simple terms, that Olivia was desperate for cash before Ethan died. Then Harris called Naomi Price. Ms. Price, he said. You obtained a recording of a meeting between the plaintiff and developer Victor Slate. Objection, Keene shouted. Illegal recording. One-party consent, Your Honor. Harris countered. The recording was legally made by a participant in the meeting, Ms. Jenner, who is present in this courtroom and will testify to its authenticity. Jenner, in the back row, gave a small, terrified nod. The judge waved him on. Harris hit play on a small speaker. The courtroom filled with Victor's impatient voice about a deadline. And then, Olivia. Her voice was not the sobbing widow. It was sharp, cold, and ugly. I don't care about the old woman. How long can she even live? Anyway, I will drag that old bitch out of there before your deadline. I promise you that. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. My neighbours looked at Olivia with undisguised horror. The judge stared at Olivia, his face a mask of cold fury. Harris let the silence hang for a beat. A woman who profits from a $1.5 million insurance policy, a woman who bleeds her husband's company dry, a woman who files a fraudulent deed after his death and conspires to drag his grieving mother from her home. That is the case before you, Your Honor. It was just words. Keene stammered, spoken in anger. It was too late. Before the judge could respond, a man stood up from the gallery, the plainclothes detective from the DA's office. Your Honor, apologies. Detective Miller. District Attorney's Office. Based on the testimony and evidence presented in this civil matter, I am informing the court that we are officially opening a criminal investigation into the plaintiff for felony deed forgery and real estate fraud. That is when Olivia broke. The mask of the civilized widow, the grieving wife, all of it disintegrated. She lunged to her feet, her face purple, her manicured hands clawed. No, you can't. I was protecting my children. How would I want? She shrieked, the words echoing in the stunned silence. Silence! The judge roared, banging his gavel. Ms. Holloway, you are incriminating yourself. Sit down. He looked at the file, then at me. His voice was final. The request for eviction is denied, with prejudice, he said, meaning she could never file it again. This court affirms that Margaret Holloway is the sole legal owner of the property, and this court is referring this entire file, the fraudulent deed, the audio recording, and the financial reports to the district attorney's office for immediate action. In the chaotic hallway, Olivia, her face pale and trembling, saw me. She lunged, her eyes wild. This isn't over. She was blocked. Detective Miller stepped between us, holding up his badge. Ms. Holloway, you need to come with me. We have an office downtown. You have an appointment. I looked past them. Victor Slate. He was already gone, vanished into the crowd. I stopped and looked at Olivia, truly looked at her, as the detective gently took her arm. I didn't raise my voice. I just spoke the truth. You forgot one thing, Olivia. It was never yours. You cannot steal what does not belong to you. Her face crumpled. It was the first time she realized she had no moves left. I walked out of that courthouse into the bright, hot Arizona afternoon. Harris was on one side, Naomi on the other. Jenna, the young assistant, joined us. A small, protective circle. I held the judge's ruling in one hand and the blue folder with my deed in the other. I took a deep, clean breath. For the first time in months, I wasn't being chased. The secret I had held, the one Robert and Ethan had given me 8 years ago, had been used. It hadn't just saved my home. It had delivered justice. Thank you all so much for listening. I'd love to know where in the world you are tuning in from. So drop a comment below and let's share our thoughts. Please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, give this video a like, and if you can, hit that hype button to help this story reach more people.